Welcome to Connected, where no topic is off topic. I am your host, Kimberly Dam. Hello, loves. Welcome back. I'm sitting here with Mr. Justin Gross, stockbroker. No, I'm totally kidding. I'm actually really excited today because I'm sitting here with a licensed clinical social worker, Justin Gross. Today we are going to be talking about the importance of a positive male presence in your life. So Justin, are you ready?
I am absolutely ready. How are you doing today, Kim? Thanks for inviting me.
I am doing well. It's a beautiful day here today in Wilmington in December, which is, amazing.
Like really unique too.
Yeah.
It's nice and warm.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah. So, Justin and I decided that we wanted to talk about this because, I personally have, I would say like the past 2 years, I started to realize ways in which I was affected from not having a positive male presence in my life as a child, and also just not having one really predominantly in my life for the past, almost 40 years. I've had, obviously, my brothers, but I think having one when you're young, specifically, that can stand in as like a father figure is slightly different.
Yeah. I would agree.
Yeah. So should we define what a positive male presence would look like, or what characteristics?
Yeah. So I guess if I'm thinking of what does a positive male influence or role model, or however you want to define that, what that looks like, I think like just a couple of things really stand out. I think somebody needs to be there that's stable, like stable throughout. I think there's certainly an aspect of protectiveness. Just with my son, like I'm worried about him just crossing the street, going to school, just anything where I'm like, is there any harm that could be done? And I want to make sure that I step into that gap.
Yeah.
And then I think being supportive is really helpful. And I think that's such a tough balance, just to be able to identify what's supportive. Am I like a helicopter parent, or am I like allowing him to make mistakes and learn, still while like incorporating protectiveness? And then I think just being present, and that can be really, really challenging with all of the distractions. The phone ringing, notifications on your cell phone, emails coming through.
Yeah.
So I think just being able to be present and just inclusive with him is so very important.
Yeah, agreed. It blows my mind also because I feel that it really teaches, in a way, just by you being those things with him, it teaches him those things.
Yes.
And I think that's where, for me, like I've learned that because I didn't have that as a child, I had to step up and almost like learn those characteristics myself and incorporate them into like who I was.
Right.
I had to be my own protector. I had to learn what that looked like and, learn how to be discerning and certain things like that. So I think all of those things are really, really important. And the stability, of course.
Right. I think having somebody present and consistent throughout just growing up is imperative. And, granted, like you can have other people, like for example, just looking back and reflecting a little bit on my own childhood, my dad worked a lot. And because of that, that meant some of the activities that we were supposed to engage in just wasn't necessarily engaging in.
Yeah.
So I just applaud my mom for kind of filling that gap at times. Like when we would go to Cub Scouts, she would be the only female in the entire troop. And I never understood why until I looked back and I noticed that my dad wasn't present.
Yeah.
So because of that, she was able to fill in that gap that I desperately probably wanted my dad to fill.
Yeah. And I think that's kind of a big part of the reason why I wanted to discuss this today because, I've just seen it from, since I've been young, how much a single parent, it's kind of put upon them to serve as the mother and the father. Specifically, I feel like women, they're the single moms. Yeah. So, but it's interesting, and I think, we as a society, we kind of have made it. I say this very cautiously, but I feel that to some extent we've made it convenient, and we've also really, oh God, I'm saying this again very cautiously, glorified it.
Mm-hmm.
And to some extent, just made it be like okay, like almost not only just applaud it, of course, single moms, like
Absolutely
amazing, but at the same token, I think it's just really important that we start to bring the focus back to how important the nuclear family is, and even with divorced parents, I think that having that positive, having both male and female presences, however you define that in your life, is up to you. But I think that that kind of needs to be brought in and understood and just kind of revered, to be honest.
No, I think having that male presence, and again, I agree with your caution behind it, because sometimes it just doesn't, unfortunately, happen. But I think children need to have a positive male figure within their lives, whether it's the father, whether it's another mentor, a role model, extended family, because I think we have so much that we're able to teach our children, and that comes with that intentionality.
Yeah, absolutely. So speaking of intentionality, which is one of my favorite things, and I know that you absolutely share in that as well.
Yes.
Would you like to talk about the ways in which you can bring in intentionality into being a father?
Yeah. Well, I think part of it starts with just being able to accept that role. And that can be a challenge in so many aspects.
I deny you.
Right. No, I think we can easily get stuck with okay, I'm a male, so my role, my goals are just to work hard, bring home money, and everything is fine. And I think that's something that society somewhat accepts.
Right.
But I think the intentionality piece is I have this child in front of me. What am I going to do? How am I going to raise him so that he learns specific values that he is able to take into his life for the rest of his life?
Right.
So I think being intentional for me means making sure that I am trying to teach him things all throughout the day, whether it's making sure you turn off the stove, or it's, hey, we're going to school, we need to have some conversations about something, what are you going to learn, and not accepting no answer from him. So just being creative in how I have those and start those conversations. So I think that's really important, just to make sure you have a broad, open line of communication, that he knows that no matter what happens, no matter what's going on, that he is able to hear me, listen to me, and be able to share things that he's like, oh my gosh, am I going to get in trouble for talking about this?
Yes.
And I never ever want those barriers to be present.
Yeah.
So I think intentionality starts with opening up the lines of communication, being open, listening to him, understanding what his needs are, what his thoughts are, being able to set limits within those, and that's such a tough balance. But I think being able to do that is so very effective from a communication perspective. So I think being able to open those up is so very important. And it's such a fine line, because there's sometimes where he just doesn't want to talk about anything. So how am I going to pull information out of him? Or am I just accepting of him coming home from school and I ask, what did you learn today? And he said, nothing. Is that okay with me? So I always try to be somewhat intentional there with the communication. Be okay, so give me something good and give me something that you would like to change. And even if that relates to friends or whatever it may look like.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I love that, because it is bringing creativity, so that they just can't come and say, I didn't learn anything at school. Instead you're thinking of other ways to kind of get those lines of communication open.
Yes, and it's just me not accepting that. And I think sometimes, as a father, we might just accept that. We're okay, he said he doesn't want to talk, so I'm fine with that. But is it my history of maybe not having a great open end of communication with my dad, or is it me saying no? Like, I want more for him,
Right.
and I want to hear what he's thinking about, what's on his mind. How do we navigate those? And that can be tough. And sometimes I'm good with, I learn nothing.
Yeah.
And other times I'm like, no, I want more from you because it's, the last day of school. So, like, are you excited about that? What do you want to do for the weekend?
No, I think that that's a brilliant way to approach it. We've talked about other topics, and Justin knows I'm a big advocate for self-love and acceptance, and I think that that's the greatest gift that we can offer another person. So when he says nothing, yes, it's a beautiful gift to just allow that. But then at the same token, what I love is that you're teaching him how to creatively assess or look at his day. And I think that that is really great too, because I think that that opens him up to also just recognizing places in which he feels grateful, or recognizing places in which there was joy or that there was happiness. So maybe while he didn't learn anything, in quotes,
right.
he recognizes that there are other aspects, or that maybe he takes a reassessment of, and he's like, wait a second, no, I did learn something.
Right.
I learned, to be kind, or I learned to, express myself in this way, or
yes.
Yeah, that's a beautiful thing.
Yes.
No, I love it. Okay. So so then going from there, do you think, because this is always kind of a topic that I know is difficult to talk about, but I very strongly recognize the ways in which I was lacking learning certain things growing up, and not that my mother didn't do a phenomenal job, because she did, and I definitely respect and honor that. But do you think that it is important to not only have the stable father figure to teach you like certain things, but how do you think that that applies to like specific, like them taking specific roles, or them teaching you specific things?
So I think gender roles are always going to be there, and I think it's important to differentiate those.
Yeah.
I think it's important that, males bring certain things into the lives of children.
Yes.
Likewise, I think it's equally just as important that women bring things into the lives of their children. And I think those barriers can be skewed. Some of those can maybe be from society saying, well, like, if dads are not going to step up, we have no choice but to step up and attempt to teach these things. But I think dads really are important, or father figures or male role models are important, because there's things that I feel like we can only teach. Granted, women are able to teach them, but I'm wondering if it's in our innate nature to be able to do so in a way that really shows them what needs to happen.
Right.
So, some things that, and this may be stereotypical, but I also think it's important. Like, the reason why I'm able to fix my own car is because of my dad.
Yeah.
I would never ask my mom in a million years, can you help me change this tire? Because it just wouldn't happen. Not because she doesn't have the skills to do it, but because my dad knows how to do it. And I was able to learn that from him. So, I think there's some roles that they just kind of fill. So I love camping with my son every chance I get. And he's very clear, like, I like to camp with you.
Yes.
I'm sure mom would appreciate, or maybe not appreciate, I don't know, but he likes to camp with me, and those are just great outdoor activities that I'm able to teach him. How do you set up the tent?
Yeah.
How do you sort of layer the sleeping bag so we're not like freezing in the middle of the night?
Right.
How are you able to like pack your bag so you're not carrying, just candy, snacks, and all things that will only last for a little while, versus not taking the important water with you.
Right.
So like, where do you, what are we able to like navigate just in the preparation of a camping trip? Like, how are we going to make that happen?
Yeah.
So again, I think there's things that just we teach them, and maybe we just happen to do it better, just like women are able to do things better than we are, just depending on what it is that is being taught. So the same thing with like home construction and like repairing things. Rarely do I contract or hire that out, because I know how to do it. But the reason is because I watched my dad, or he taught me. He would, I remember in our living room, he handed me the roller and it's like, all right, I need you to manage this wall. And I'm looking at it and I'm like, but this is a huge wall. Now, I didn't realize, in looking back, I could see this, he filled in the like area that I was able to paint so it would work, but I was able to roll that wall. And he was like, great job, like, that's awesome. And so I'm able to learn some of those things. But I think we can also teach like other stuff that might not be like physical related.
Right.
So like integrity, like is really important to me.
Yes.
Like just being a good citizen is really important to me. So how am I able to teach? And it's not like teaching through words, it's teaching through actions. I remember my dad would say, act as I do, not as I, no, act as, what is it saying?
It's do, yeah, it's not do as I say, it's not do as I say, but do as I do.
Yes.
Yeah,
so he would never be consistent with that. So I'm like, but you're speeding, Dad, and you are mad at me because I'm speeding. You talk back to me. But that's something that I really very much take seriously with my son, is being able to be intentional with how I treat people, making sure like he's holding the door and opening the door for, especially for females, if they're walking in. And granted, some may, like, I got this, and they do, of course they have that, but it's still him being intentional with, you open that door, or you say thank you.
Right.
When they lay the check down, it's like, or they bring the drink, thank you for that, I appreciate it. So being very intentional, but I have to start that.
Yeah.
I have to be the one to be able to, like, initiate that thank you, or that opening of the door, or, you need to help this person or that person. So I think we could teach those innate things of integrity, like being a good citizen, like respecting females, being intentional with those relationships.
Yeah. I mean, I think that that's exactly what happens. But a lot of people think that it's really important. And, I believe in gender roles, and I do believe that, there are just some things that I am naturally better at than others. And I do think that that might have, more to do with, like, just where I am in my feminine and masculine energy at that time. But I also really 100% believe that so much of what we learn is just simply through observation and watching other people. And when we have people in our lives that are of high integrity and are appreciative and, give thanks and all of those things, that we just naturally mimic those. It doesn't matter where you are. You can go from having what we would consider very negative influences in your life to having very positive influences in your life. And I think we can all agree that your behavior changes around those people.
Absolutely.
So, I just think that it's really very important.
And it was funny that you said that your behavior changes regardless, or when you're around different people. And I think that talks about the importance of being authentic and everything.
Right.
So am I able to hold the door in all circumstances, or am I just doing it because, like, I'm trying to impress someone?
Yeah.
So I would never want him to hold the door because he wants to impress that girl.
Yeah.
I want him to hold the door because that's the right thing to do, and that's how he's able to be, I guess, a good citizen, for lack of a better word.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It's all about, like, navigating where your personal values are and where your personal morals are. But I think that obviously you learn that mostly from the people that are immediately around you. And for young children, that's your parents.
Yeah.
So great. Okay. So now my next, I kind of want to, because, you are a licensed clinical social worker, I kind of would like to go into talking about ways in which you kind of see this play out in that atmosphere.
So I would say that gender roles are really important. And I always, anytime I'm doing any kind of like family-related therapy, that can be a really big struggle because I need the whole family to be present. It's easy for me to just work whoever is in front of me and accept that. So a lot of times in my family therapy, unfortunately, it was, mom and child that happened to show up. And I'm like, hey, well, where's dad? And it's like, oh, well, we're separated, or we're divorced, or, oftentimes what we see is he's just not around. Or it's well, he sends the check, so that's good. but that's not sufficient at all. And I think that's where we need um, males to always be able to step up and take on that role. That's really, really important because that's going to shape the lives of their child for years to come. And that's going to play out when they're older in their family systems, whatever they create. Are they okay with, well, dad just sent money, so because of that, I guess I'm just going to send money, and that's not enough. So in all of my family therapy, I always encourage, I need that male presence, whether it's the father figure, like a one-on-one session with him saying, look, thank you for sending money month to month for child support because that's what's ordered by the courts.
Right.
But that's not sufficient. That's not going to teach and shape him. Yes, maybe it will help pay the bill or buy groceries for the week, but he doesn't see that.
Mm-hmm.
The mom, of course, sees that,
right.
but he doesn't. So that's where are you going to help support that system to help him or her grow in a way that the values that you have are reflected in your children. So it's always bothersome when I do have sessions and again, this is just from history. I don't have the specific statistics, but I would say it's really easy for me to say most of the time when I am doing a family session, mom's the one that's bringing in.
Right.
And that needs to change from a clinical social work perspective.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Agreed. And I'm wondering, obviously, I think it's interesting when I look at society because I just really wonder, I feel like there's a lot of blame on that. Men were never really taught to be fathers; they were taught to be providers.
Yeah.
And to me, to be a provider is not the same thing. I mean, yes, it is. It is masculine. It is, if you consider masculine energy to provide. Yes, that is one aspect.
Sure.
But in terms of, I just think that we just kind of looked at the more financial, the financial contribution and just been like, okay, you did your thing, and now we're good.
Right.
I'm just going to sit here and raise the child.
It's like the hunter and gatherer sort of
Yeah.
perspective, which sure that made sense years ago, but I don't think it's necessary now.
Yeah, I think that it's different now. I think that we're having to learn many different things now. I think that things back then were, not to sound cliche, but they were a little bit more simplistic.
Sure.
And roles were actually far more simplistic.
Right.
It wasn't until, a young boy became older that then he went out with his father and he taught him how to hunt and do all of those things. But
what you noticed there and what you said was that he grew up and went with his father.
yeah, because
and now is that happening? And I don't think so. It's yes, sure, I sent home whatever I caught when I was hunting. I sent that home. But again, how is he going to learn to hunt if he's never present with his dad?
Yeah, they sent it through USPS. And it's just here's the fish that I caught. No, it's so true. I feel like they were, under the, the supervision of the mother. The mother was nurturing, provided in her way, and then when they got to be old enough, then they could go out. But you're right. I don't think that has been re-examined and re-looked at as to, okay, that's how it was. But then I don't know. So I'm just curious, where that shift really occurred. I'm guessing.
Well, I guess that's a pretty broad question, but I know that the shift certainly did occur.
Yes.
And I think there's many factors. So, sometimes just that work-life stress.
Yes.
So it's hey, we need you to work 40 hours, but we also need to fly you out to California, and then you're going to stay a couple of nights, and we'll fly you back. And you're like, but I have my son's baseball game.
Yeah.
So it falls to priorities.
Yes.
How do you prioritize what's important? And I think that that's something that's frequently missing. So yes, is work important? Absolutely. But is shaping your son's life more important? I would argue yes.
Yeah.
Because there's always sources of income out there. But you don't have a second chance to shape the lives of your child.
Right.
And I think as a male, you need to take every opportunity to be proactive, to be intentional with how do you spend your time and what values are you teaching him.
Yeah.
I think we need to teach the values that work is important. But at the same time, that can't be taught if you're not having an intentional conversation or an intentional interaction with your child.
Right. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I was basically going to say that I think it probably happened with the onset of the 40-hour, with the idea that, the 40-hour work week and all that good stuff. But so I just, and I'm not like sitting here and criticizing society, but it's so funny how we kind of phrase things, right? So we phrase that society, like the way that the U.S. is currently run or that it operates, it's not supportive of the mother working. When I would argue that in all actuality, it's not supportive of the nuclear family. Period.
No, because I think if you kind of like just going back to our hunter-gatherer, they're both kind of like out in the workforce.
Yes.
So it's additional roles for both genders.
Yes.
However, I would argue that women have consistently stepped up, whereas men are like, well, this is what I need to do, and this is what I've always been doing, but they forget to step up.
Yeah.
It's like, well, I'm working. Like that's. I need you to understand that I'm working.
Yes. Yeah. And women didn't really get into the workforce until later, so there's that. And so now, obviously, women are now facing that. Really, they're facing the challenge of the work-life balance. But I think that, when it initially started, they were just like, okay, men, now you're going off to work, and women, you're staying at home, and that's how it got split up. And so then when child support and things like that came around, it was just like division of labor, really.
Right. It was division of labor, but unfortunately, it was the child that suffered.
Yeah. So do you want to talk about that a little bit? How it applies in terms of like where you see like discrimination?
Yeah, so I think sometimes I think there can be some, and discrimination may be a somewhat strong term, because I think it's maybe unintentional. It's, let's say, unfortunately, the nuclear family splits up, and the court is making decisions. Oftentimes, if the man is not stepping up, the court's like, no, you are going to step up, but that role is only financial.
Right.
I need you to just send money, and then little Johnny will be totally fine, and everything will be okay. And we're like, oh, but you're missing something.
Yeah.
On the other hand, you have the mom sitting in court, and they're like, I'm glad I have the money, and that's good, but like if I fail, I'm the one that's in trouble.
Right.
So it's not like, oh, okay, well, dad didn't pick him up from school. It's you forgot to pick him up from school. So I think they have that added pressure, and I think that is something that I think needs to be highlighted, because men have such a significant role that they can fill besides that. So I think we need to sort of bridge some of those discriminatory acts.
Right.
I think one way to do that is to not only look at like it from a court perspective, but how do you look at that from little Johnny's perspective?
Right.
So yes, he knows that the family may have separated and that has happened, but what are we going to do to continue to support him in all aspects of his life? So that means male presence. Again, I know I said before, like they don't see the check come into mom's account, and she's like, oh, this is from dad, so let's make sure that we buy your favorite cereal because that's what he wants. I think dad can step up and say, let's go shopping, so that we can pick up whatever items we need, and then I can help with that. Same thing with activities. I know I alluded to my dad worked frequently, so my mom would be the one to take me camping. And again, I appreciate that, but I could have learned so much more from my dad just on the practicality of camping had he said and prioritized that. So yes, there's discrimination, and that's from like a societal perspective, but I think what parents can reflect on is how is that going to play out in this family, in this individual nuclear family, and understanding that money is not the only way to support the child. It is a quarter of the way, I would argue, to support the child, because there's so much more of, that respect, that teaching, that intentionality, how we're spending our time, are we being intentional with taking little Johnny to the park, And are they able to even manage some of the conflict in the family system? Because sometimes when the court's involved, it's, he said, she said, attorneys are like, no, we need to look at this, and it's like one against the other, where it should be, how can we come together as a family unit and be able to support the child, prioritize him, teach him the skills that they need, with the male really needing to step up.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. So do you think that it's getting better?
No, because in any of my sessions, it's still the female bringing them up. But I think I could take that role as a therapist and apply that to the family system. And to say and to ask questions of, I'm glad he's following the court order, but he's missing the mark here.
Okay.
And where does that division of labor come from? Where both roles, gender specific, can be provided to little Johnny so that he is able to feel fulfilled, that he's able to learn, and to have sort of like both of the female role and the male role, and how both of those look in their lives. So that's something that I think will result in change. It's, I think, when we impact the individual, and they can take that impact and impact society as a great role.
Absolutely. Yeah, so so obviously, so then what you're saying is in order for us to shift into that, you think that there needs to be a better understanding of really what a male contributes to a person's life.
Absolutely.
Okay.
No, I think that's very
totally.
important.
Yeah. Yeah, that's part of what I'm here. No, it's extremely important, and I look at my own experience and really just how it has played out in every single one of my relationships. And I'm not talking romantic. I'm talking like just being discerning and just standing up for myself. And there is a certain level, I'm not saying that, I will say this, confidence, as a female, if I had a father that was present, that encouraged me and that was supportive, I hate to say this, but I feel that I would have more quickly learned confidence than coming from my mother. And that might be because it was coming from my father. And it might be that, do you think that it might have been because it's, the father-daughter? Or do you think that it's that way for boys too?
No, I would say it's probably both. And when you were reflecting on that, it was funny because periodically, I'll take a picture of Tristan, when we go to the skate park, for example. And I'm like, all right, he has his helmet on. He has all his protective things. So I manage that aspect of being a good father and the protective part of that.
Right.
Because he has all the gear. But I think as a male, and again, I say this with caution, but I think as a male, I'm like, no, I'm encouraging you because I know that you can do that. I've watched you, I've learned about you, I've communicated with you. I know what you're able to do and where that fear exists. So I'm able to say, no, I want you to drop in on that hill. And he's like, Dad, I can't do it. And I'm like, no. You absolutely are able to do that.
Yeah.
You have the gear. Now it's just get out of your mind and look at how you're going to navigate this because you've been practicing, you do it.
Yeah.
So I think I offer, as a male, a little bit more encouragement to get him to overcome some of those barriers that he sees. Whereas, and again, I don't want this to come across the wrong way, where maybe he feels like, oh, let's try again tomorrow. Let's practice. Go. I don't want you to break anything, and I'm like, yes, and that's needed because sometimes it's like, no, I know you can do this. And you're like, well, this is the biggest one. And Mom is like, hey, can we start with the small one? I'm like, I'm glad you brought that nurturing perspective.
Yes.
I'm glad you brought that in because that brought me, grounded me. But I think I'm able to provide that subtle encouragement to say, I need you to take a risk because that's what you're doing. But I know you enough because I spent enough time with you and I've been consistent with that. Where you're able to take on that new task or learn something new or overcome something that was fearful. And I think sometimes I can hesitate with that stuff because my dad is not always present. So I need to constantly reflect on all right, here's the barrier. What perspective do I need here? What gender role can really support me here?
Yeah.
And that's hard to answer without my dad being present. But I think as a father figure myself, I'm able to say no, like that's something that I can teach him and that I can implement in his life. And he can carry with him.
Absolutely. Like I definitely agree. I think that there's something about the masculine, like the, not over, but like a very strong masculine presence that can really get you to overcome your fears and just, take the bull by the horns and just go for it.
Yeah.
And versus the feminine, which is, yes, we love to nurture. And so it may be that we don't, it may be that we still put confidence in that child, but it's in a more subtle way. It's in a more, we'll make sure that you take care of yourself way first.
Yes.
Which again, still very important, but completely different. Both are important though. Absolutely, both are important because some things in life just call for one energy more than the other.
Yes.
So yeah, 100%. I love that in the whole skate park.
Yeah, and so I sent that video to his meeting there, his grandmother.
Yeah.
And she was like, "Why do you have my son out there on a skateboard?" Or my grandson out there on a skateboard.
Yeah.
And I was like, "But he did it."
Yeah.
And he's like, "Well, how?" I'm like, "We practice." And I said, "You have this. I know you can do it."
Yeah.
And I pushed him enough where, there were no broken bones. I just want to clarify that now. He did it. And the smile on his face, I think I was like, where he knew, he's like, I did rock that out.
Yeah. Yeah, it's such a beautiful thing. I don't know. Yeah, I definitely feel that, it's just so truly important. And I mean, I could go into all the ways that I've really had to. I know a lot of women, whether they've had to do it consciously or unconsciously, a lot of women that went without, and I'm sure men too. I don't know why I'm paying more attention, probably just because it was my own experience.
Sure.
But men and women that lacked that father presence in their life, ways in which they really had to, like, it's funny because we know the mother has to step up, but the child has to step up too, because the mother, even though she may have done a great job, there were still ways in which, we all lack.
Yeah.
We're not perfect. And so there were ways in which I had to step up as a child or even as an adult and say, hey, I recognize that, I haven't, all of the male figures in my life have been unstable. Like they haven't been solidly there for me. And then I was choosing, which I know as a therapist, I was choosing that. I was choosing people, in my romantic relationships and in my friendships. They would come and go, like seriously, that would just go off the radar for months.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, you reflect back and you're like, okay, so because that's how I identify a male presence in my life.
And it's funny that you kind of brought that up because that happens and it's so easy to see, like, if you don't have somebody consistent in your life, maybe the question could be for those parents is like, well, when are they going to leave or when are they going to go away? And then you also hear and just see those sad stories of like, parents trying to work behind the scenes, dad coming for visitation or pickup, and they're sitting out there and it's sad. It almost makes you want to cry with their little glove and baseball, like dad's going to come and pick me up.
Yeah.
And he never shows, which happens.
Oh, yeah.
And it's terrible. So what is he learning? I can't depend on men. I can't depend on males to follow through. And then where does he turn? He turns to mom, who has to now explain everything as far as, like, dad didn't show up.
Yeah.
And, it was like, well, that happened last time. I'm like, I'm sorry. I can't control that. And that's where I think males need to see how their inability to maintain that presence, to reduce those feelings of abandonment, how that is going to play out in their lives for the rest of their lives.
Yeah.
Can they trust men? And if that's not there, then that's not going to happen. And that's tough.
Yeah, well, and it really prevents the development of the future nuclear family.
Sure.
Because if you are a male or a female that grew up without a father presence in your life, you are going to have a difficult time not only attaining a healthy male presence, but then also creating a relationship out of that that is going to grow over time and then obviously create a nuclear family if that's what you choose to do. But it's just,
and then
it's really like a recipe for, it's just kind of like a lose-lose situation.
Yeah, and it's unfortunate because, like you said, it's the child that unfortunately loses there.
Mm-hmm.
And then when they are older and, attempting to, address like romantic relationships, the only perspective that they have is their mom's perspective. And thank you. I mean, I cannot say it enough. Thank you for being able to step up, because sometimes you're the only one that chooses to do that, unfortunately.
Right.
But those are things that they take into future relationships.
Oh, yeah. Yep, definitely. It's so, I mean, I can get into how my thoughts on how so many women are actually standing more in their masculine energy right now than their feminine.
Because they have to.
Yep, they have no other
There's no other
choice.
choice,
Yep. So now we're starting to lose the feminine. Yeah. Well, thank you for being here.
Oh, absolutely.
I love this conversation. I know we could go on forever, but
I was going to say, how much time do you have? Right. Because there's so much that men can offer.
Yeah.
But I would say just look at where you are at as a male, whose lives you can pour into, and what roles do you want to teach others. And I think if you could just reflect on those things, how are you providing stability? How are you providing protectiveness? How are you providing intentional presence with those around you?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's, any male can do that.
Oh,
like,
gosh, yes.
It's just a matter of being in that.
Yeah.
And
accepting that, being intentional with that, and wanting that.
Yeah.
Because you're shaping the future.
Yeah, absolutely. You're being impactful regardless of what your role is, whether or not you're a father or not.
Correct.
So, well, great. Thank you, Justin, so much for being here.
Yeah, no, thanks for inviting me, Kimberly. I appreciate it.
Great. All right, well, everybody, thank you so much again for listening. As always, if you have any topics in the future that you would like me to discuss, please feel free to drop me a line at connectedpodcast.us@gmail.com. Thank you so much. Stay well and stay connected.